I will walk in the presence of God in the land of the living. I've learned something from my daughter and son-in-law. They often, and I may have mentioned this before, they often tell me specific ways that they appreciate me. They might say, thanks for X, Y, and Z. I appreciate you. Or they might say, I appreciate X, Y, Z that you do. It's a big help. And it makes me feel awful good when they do this. And so because of that, I've tried to emulate that practice with others to greater and lesser extent, right? It's a work in progress. And in so doing, I've discovered the benefit to myself, right, when I'm expressing gratitude. I say this because Psalm 116 is a song of gratitude. It's a poem that was written after a difficult time of life that the psalmist has endured, survived, overcome. It's most likely that it was proclaimed to the whole congregation so that they could hear and experience the gratitude for what God had done for this one individual. And that person bears witness to the group that God's been active in their life. And so that's encouraging to everybody who hears. So just a quick refresher. So it begins, I love the Lord because God has heard my voice in supplication. And then it goes on, I love God because God has inclined an ear to me, because God is merciful, because I was brought low and God saved me, because God has freed my soul from death. So the thinking is that everyone and every community benefits by remembering and bearing witness publicly to the ways in which they have felt God to have been active in their daily lives. Of course, everybody needs to hear this. And when we find ourselves in the midst of difficult times, it's so important that we hear from others along the way that these times can be endured, survived, and overcome due to God's care and provision. So the psalm serves not only to witness what God has done, but also as an opportunity of giving thanksgiving and praise to God. Having prayed for help, having experienced all the bounty of God in response, now the psalmist makes good on this vow made to sing God's praises. So by that I mean the verses 12 to 14, which we didn't sing today, they're not included in the lectionary, but they say, well, what shall I return to God for all this bounty given to me? I, in return, will lift up this cup of salvation, call upon the name of God, and I will pay my vows to God in the presence of all the people. And so when we hear the gospel words, when Jesus asks the disciples, and by natural progression, all of us today, Jesus asks, who do you say that I am? Might we respond with a litany of gratitude? Might we ask ourselves, what do we owe our God in response for all that God has done for us by creating us and all that we see and love, by providing for us in our daily living, by drawing us into this community of faith? For all of us, from life to faith, we owe God this big song of thanksgiving and the witness to the world of all that God has done for us. So I ask myself and all of us, what might such a song of thanksgiving look like? Might we have an opportunity to bear witness to God's activities in our lives, in the lives of this very community that we might explore together? Psalm 116 is set between these two extremes, two existences, between the land of the dead and the land of the living. Both get mentioned in the psalm, the land of the dead and the land of the living. And the land of the dead isn't just a place, it's the state of being. The psalmist proclaims that I once felt dead. I was lost, forlorn, troubled, while still very much alive. The benefits of God's actions are that the psalmist was delivered from that death and restored to a life that really feels like living. Many say, and it's not untrue, right, that at the end of our life, that is when we are released into the arms of a loving God, into eternal life. But there's something in this psalm that's very this worldly about the promise. The promise is that what God does now, listening to our supplications, answering our prayers, promising us life out of death, this life is transformed as well. I will walk in the presence of God in the land of the living.